I am Jonathan Cohen. I'm the Vice President of Community Impact at the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, and we are pleased to be co-hosting today along with our partners at Mass Audubon.
Thank you so much. Welcome to our Worcester County Climate Summit. Woohoo! We're here. I want to acknowledge the most important people in this room. You are the most people important in this room. So I'd like to do show of hands. Okay? How many people are here from, for example, land trusts? Awesome, thank you. How many people are here are from watershed organizations, collaborations, watershed? Wonderful, we love the water folks. How many people are here from local climate organizations? Excellent. How many people are municipal staff? Thank you very much on a Saturday. How many are perhaps youth climate leaders who have been youth climate leaders? Oh, we have a group coming. Thank you very much. We have another group coming in pretty soon too. How many here are involved in local agriculture or farming? Awesome, thank you so much. How many of you consider yourself to be a local activist? Awesome. And how many of you just live and work in Central Mass? Everybody, right? That's why we're here. Thank you so, so much. It means a lot to have you all here. You are the reason we exist today. I want to also introduce who we are. I want to encourage our planning committee team to please stand up for a moment and wave. I want to do a big shout out to all these wonderful folks. Thank you. It is a labor of love, and we're excited for you to be here for Delivery Day. So I'm going to pass it back off to Jonathan.
Very good. We have pledged not to be slide readers today. We're not going to read the PowerPoints, but I'm going to break the rule that we've already declared right up front because I want to have all of us hear our goal for today. So the goal of the summit, and I'm just going to read. I'll read with you. The goal of the summit is to share best practices, foster collaboration around common priorities, and promote county-wide capacity. This summit is a first step on a path, maybe even a journey, to create a Worcester County climate collaborative, one that is going to increase resilience to climate impacts, restore natural habitats, and mobilize diverse communities for collaborative climate action. That's what we're here for. We're trying to find ways to work together to move the issues that we all care about separately and collectively forward. So, great. Here's our plan for today. You've seen the schedule. It's on boards. It's on your tables. We're going to spend the morning learning together. We're going to have lunch, and we're going to eat together and make new friends and make new connections and make old connections and reconnect with those as well. And then this afternoon, we're going to work together to make some planning decisions for the future. That's what we are doing today. Turn it back to you, Jen. Right.
I realized I forgot to say my name. I am Jen Madsen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the regional director for Mass Audubon, and that's not the most important thing today. Today, the most important thing are how we treat each other in this room, right? You are all an extremely collaborative group of folks. You know how to work together. You know how to be kind, how to be respectful. But that's what we want to make sure we're centering our conversations today, because this is hard. This is hard, frustrating work. So today is a day of respect. Today is a day of listening, of centering this work on what matters, and on focusing on solutions, right? We're looking for ways to connect, to solve something, right? So please speak up, sit back, learn, and be present. That is the biggest piece of today. One thing, there's a big elephant in the room. There's a lot of climate anxiety out there, right? I would like you to take a moment, and if you'd like to close your eyes or just take a deep breath and say, this work is hard. This work is emotional. It's physical, it is social, it is mental, right? This work is long, but the payoff is so huge. Right? This work would not happen without hope, right? And I want you to really center that work today. Hope in the land that we have, hope in our own resiliency, hope in the water, hope in the people who live here and work here and care about this. And I want to do one more show of hands is how many of you, if you look around the room, have felt hope in this work because of someone else here? I have felt hope, right? We are here to give each other hope, and you are here to give others hope. So let's focus on that, okay? It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to know it's hard, but we gotta have hope, okay?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about geography for just a moment. This event has been advertised as a Worcester County Climate Summit. We're going to be alternating between Worcester County and Central Mass in our language. A few reasons for those boundary definitions. First of all, Greater Worcester Community Foundation serves Worcester County, so we're geographically bound. But we know we have 60 towns. We know there are collaboratives and partnerships that overlap those boundaries and borders. And most importantly, we know that Mother Nature doesn't care about the county boundaries. Maybe a little more respect for it would be appreciated, but that train has already left the station. We recognize that the challenges and issues of climate, of environmentalism don't respect those boundaries. So we're flexing, we're allowing for that space to be a little bit larger. But we are definitely focused on central Massachusetts and not all of Massachusetts. We hope we have learnings that can be shared countywide and beyond, but our work and focus is geographically centered for lots of reasons, among them being we all live here together and we are all neighbors, and also in recognition that sometimes, particularly out in Eastern Mass, they tend to keep a lot of the attention for themselves and not really give us enough of it out here. And so we're trying to make a locus of energy and attention so that we can draw some of that attention out this direction as well.
Okay, before we bring on one of the highlights, absolutely today, I do want to also say across the room we have these spaces called thought spots. These are spaces for you to come up and put ideas, questions that you might have. Please, anytime, there's little Post-its on your tables, pens and things. If you have stuff that you're like, I don't want to forget this, I want to talk about it, or I care about this, or I have a question about this, you can plop them up during the day. Jim McGovern, you have been serving as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives since 1997. He is the ranking Democrat of the powerful House Rules Committee. He has served as a chair of the House Hunger Caucus and as a member of the House Agricultural Committee. This last role, an extremely rare choice for the member of the Mass delegation, has paired well with the periodic tours of area family farms. Right? Jim has earned a career rating of 99% from the League of Conservation Voters. Represents most of our beautiful Worcester County. So thank you, Jim. I do have a very special person I'd like to bring up before I bring you up to honor you, and her name is Laura Matei. Could you come on up, please?
I'm not as special as the person who this award is for. So every year, Sudbury Valley Trustees awards an award for distinguished public service. And last year, Representative McGovern was not able to be with us, so I wanted to offer him this award today. And it is for the reasons that were just spoken and all of his support for land and water conservation and local farmlands and beyond. Thank you so very much for all of your dedication and work.
Thank you, Jim. Stage is yours.
What kind of bird is it?
Well, after that build-up, I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say. First of all, let me thank Mass Audubon and the Greater Worcester Community Foundation for all their support for this event here today. This is amazing. I want to, I'm happy to be with all of you. and to be here in central Massachusetts and not in Washington, D.C. But in all candor, I'd prefer root canal than being in Washington, D.C. I look around this room and there are lots of friends and lots of allies. And I want to thank you in advance because, as was just pointed out, I've actually been in Congress longer than I ever thought I would be. And a lot of the people in this room have not only served as allies, but as teachers. And I just want you to make sure you understand the importance of being teachers, because just because you get elected to office doesn't mean you know everything, whether you're at the local level, the state level, or at the federal level. And there are many in this room here today who have repeatedly been in my Washington office, in my Worcester office, my Leominster office, in my Northampton office, and in a number of other offices, because by the time I retire, I will have represented this entire state, thanks to redistricting. But I just want you to know how much I appreciate your guidance and helping me focus on issues. And it's great to be here at the Worcester County Climate Summit. I'm looking forward to hearing from our climate chief. I think so. I will be fairly brief here because I want to hear the keynote. While the president and Republicans are doing everything they can right now to destroy climate action down in D.C., it is amazing to be with all of you here, celebrating something good. And I want to, again, say a big thank you to Heather and her team at Mass Audubon, along with Jonathan and his team from the Greater Worcester Community Foundation for putting this together. These things just don't happen. And so I appreciate that. But the truth is that that climate change is not getting the global attention that it deserves right now. To put it mildly, there's a lot going on, but climate change continues to be an urgent and existential problem. It's not going away just because we have our hands full. And I know for a lot of people, when you turn on the news, it's overwhelming. It's not one thing, it's not two things, it's 6 things or 10 things a day that make your head want to explode. The world is facing more than 1.5 centigrade of warming. Polar ice caps are melting rapidly. Rising temperatures are causing weakened currents, leading to more extreme weather. Permafrost is thawing, releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the air. And folks across the globe are already seeing devastating impacts. In Bangladesh, millions of people are vulnerable to displacement from floods, sea level rise, salinization, and cyclones. Afghanistan faces horrendous droughts affecting more than half of the population. Land that was fertile decades ago is now dry and arid. Climate change isn't some distant issue halfway across the globe either. Just ask our farmers here in Massachusetts what they experience with a constantly changing climate. I do farm tours every year, and I hear and climate change is always up front and center in a lot of discussions I have with our local farmers. I mean, they're on the front lines of this crisis, dealing with crazy weather, droughts, floods, invasive species, and more. However fast we're transitioning away from fossil fuels, we need to go faster. And even if the progress of the past few years means we're not going to turn into the second Venus, the UN's human rights experts say that the world is heading toward climate apartheid. A world that does not do everything it can to avoid the worst impacts of climate is not only less habitable, it is also less healthy, less safe, less just, and less prosperous. So we have to fight back. We have to fight back against this administration's full-scale assault on clean energy and environmental protections. There's a prevailing feeling of hopelessness, disorientation, or confusion about how to resist and rebuild our climate environment. But that's why we need collective climate action now more than ever. I mean, that's why these meetings, quite frankly, are particularly important. I mean, we need to plan, we need to be more diligent, and we need to be smarter in terms of our strategy to combat what is happening. And so, there are reasons why collective action and why organizing has been such a successful tactic in the history of our country and others. We need to band together for strength in numbers. Together we speak with a louder and unified voice. Public awareness and public opinion don't exist just as forces of nature. They are shaped. And the grassroots is where priority setting and leadership really comes from. All the advancements we have made in this area haven't come because you just happen to elect a more enlightened group of politicians. They've happened because of the pressure from the grassroots on these politicians to move and to prioritize these issues. We also need to band together because we are already bound together, and we need to say so. I mean, your health is my health. Your food security is my food security, and your disaster is my disaster. That's solidarity, and we're dealing with a global problem, and there's truly nowhere to hide. You know, banding together is the only option, quite frankly. Since Patriots Day is coming up, I can put it as simply as our founders did: join or die. The gains on climate action from the Biden years were a victory for the climate movement, and a lot of you all deserve credit for some of those victories. We wish they were more. They would not have happened without organizing, full stop. I mean, you just need to know that. The Inflation Reduction Act was something to be proud of, even while those of us who want our country to be as ambitious as possible can look back and say there's much more work that we need to do. You don't hear it in these terms as much these days, but we still desperately need a Green New Deal. We need to expand our imagination about what we can do when we have power again, and what kind of problems that climate action actually solve. The climate is not getting nearly enough attention right now because there are so many crises happening in our country and around the world. But the huge irony is that strong climate policies help solve these other problems as well. Affordability, get off fossil fuels and build livable communities. I mean, we're in a war right now over fossil fuels when all is said and done. Economic growth, clean jobs are good jobs. Global migration, look at the climate-driven reasons why people leave their homelands. Conflict, again, the world is safer when chaos doesn't lead to mass displacement and resource scarcity. And petro bullies like Vladimir Putin lose their footing when their oil and gas are worthless. This is a movement where we need to be ready to act when the tables turn and those who demand climate actions have a say again. And again, I am hoping and I am praying. I mean, I'm kneeling on rice. I'm so desperate right now to make sure that these November elections actually represent a real change in this country. Because if they don't, then, we're in deep trouble. But look, that's where all of you come in. That's where the climate movement comes in. The climate movement has been at the center of the struggle for a just society before, and it must be at the center once again. Collective action is about both creating the conditions for change and then making the change when the opportunity comes. We need to be ready. We don't know how long the tide will turn in our favor, but we have to aggressively take advantage of every single second that we have in power again. And whether you've been in the fight for years or you're coming to this for the first time, we need you. We need you desperately. Collective action means organizing. Things may change quickly for the better in Washington, and we can't get caught flat-footed. We need a plan for how we are going to make doing the right thing the only viable option for decision makers. We need our leaders to be thinking boldly. I've been around for a while, been in power, been out of power, been in power. I think one of the dangers of just winning back power is everybody thinks like, oh, we got to be really cautious. Let's not think big. Let's take baby steps. Let's move in very, very small increments. We got to reject that. We got to be as bold as we possibly can be up front. So that is why I'm grateful that you are here. And I just want you all to know that, I want to be wind at your back. I'm here because I think it's important to be here and to say thank you to all of you, but to also say I'm ready for the fight. I'm getting my armor shined up, and when things turn, we're going to battle, and we're going to win, and we're going to win. We're going to save this planet, and I know that's why everybody is here. Somebody asked me, like, what are these beads that you have on your wrist? These are Tibetan prayer beads, and they were given to me a year and a half ago by His Holiness the Dalai Lama when I visited him in Dharamsala, India, leading up to his 90th birthday. And he gave them, he blessed them, and he gave them to me, and he said, wear these. These are to help you deal with your negativity, with your worries, with your fears, with your concerns. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him again soon to tell him they don't work. I mean, I got to tell you, I am scared out of my mind about what's happening in this country and what's happening on this planet right now. And there's one or two things we can all do. We can retreat and just pull the shade and say, wake me up when it's over. And by then it may be too late, or we can fight. And so I had the honor of serving in Congress with a great fighter, the late Congressman John Lewis, who was one of our great civil rights leaders. And I remember going with him to Selma, Alabama, and he reenacted the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge when he, marched for voting rights. Almost got killed by Alabama state troopers during that time. And he told all of us, he said, you all have to get into good trouble, but necessary trouble. You're getting into good trouble, and it's necessary trouble. And I am hopeful that we will ultimately prevail. This has not been as easy as we all had hoped it would be. And every time we think we turn a corner, then something comes up. But we're going to get through this. And we're going to prevail. And so I am happy to be here, just simply to say to everybody, thank you, and have a great conference. All the best.
Thank you so much, Rep. McGovern. We're so incredibly grateful that you joined us today and inspiring us with your words of wisdom to take this action, this important climate action, and this good trouble right now. So my name's Heather Packard. I'm Mass Audubon's community organizer, so I manage our grassroots advocacy program statewide. And I am personally a big believer in the grassroots organizing. Obviously, it's my job, but how it ladders up from grassroots local work, leading to success at the state level, and then also to the federal level. That is really a theory of victory, and we've seen it successful in many, many of the best environmental laws that have happened at the federal level. It started at the town and city level, right in our communities. So I'm so honored today to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Melissa Hoffer. Melissa is Massachusetts' first ever climate chief. She's ensuring that climate change is being considered in all relevant decision-making at our state, and that climate policy is progressing across every agency. Melissa Hoffer was a day one political appointee in the Biden administration, and she joined them and was served as a principal deputy counsel at the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Prior to that, I found, and I think this is fascinating, Chief Hoffer worked for the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. I think many of you knew that. She was the chief of the Environmental Protection Division. But there, among many other things, I'm sure, she led the office's litigation against ExxonMobil. They are deceiving Massachusetts consumers about the risk of climate change and what it posed as a risk to their business and the impacts of fossil fuel products on climate change. So she has been a leader in this fight for many years. In her spare time, Chief Hoffer raises a small herd of dairy goats right here in Worcester County and Barry, Mass. And I actually have to share that I can remember when Chief Hoffer first started that goat herd way back years ago in Concord, Mass, because she was my neighbor. And Melissa was very, very patient when my then 3-year-old daughter insisted on visiting her goats every time we left our house. And we were sharing some wonderful photos of those times. So I am just so honored and thrilled to be able to welcome her. Please join me in welcoming Climate Chief Hoffer.
Thank you, Heather, so much for that. For a while, Meg used to sleep with a picture of my goat Luna under her pillow, which was very, very amazing. So I just wanted to thank a couple of folks before we get started. Jonathan and Jen, thank you so much for bringing us together this morning. David O'Neill, I know he's not here, but he's an incredible leader and appreciate so much his work at Audubon. Stephanie Covino, I think you are here today. Thank you so much for supporting our Climate Stories event over the summer and for being my backup today as my goat Tundra is about to go into labor. Henry Woolsey is here today, who is the father of Biomap. If you don't know Henry's work, an incredible body of work identifying biodiversity in our state that we rely on routinely. Erica, I just wanted to say hi to you. So many friends and neighbors, I'm sure I'm going to leave some out, but I just want to note that Erica was my bus captain when I first moved to Barrie in 2014 and went down to the Climate March. And there's a whole other backstory to that I will share with you if we have time. But I'm so glad to see you after all these years. Sue, just wanted to give a shout out to you, who has been leading our fledgling climate action group in Barrie, Massachusetts. That's bold, and we appreciate the work that you have done to begin to have that conversation in our town. And I don't know where Pat Benjamin is sitting. Pat is a scientist who taught for many years at Worcester State and has been a leading convener of the Council for the Uncertain Human Future at Clark University, and an incredible leader in her own right. So with that, I was going to save this to the end, but then I decided to begin with it after Jen's remarks. But if you don't know this book, it's called In the Absence of the Ordinary, and it's by a guy named Francis Weller, who has written a lot about grief, and in particular, climate grief. So this is a passage from his chapter called Everything is Burning, and it was his reflections of his community's experience of fires in Northern California. You might remember this was back in the fall of 2017. So I'll just read you briefly as we start our time together. In some Northern European cultures, the season of grieving the loss of someone close was known as a period of living in the ashes. This extended time was an era of descent, a movement into the underworld, where the bitter tincture of grief was meant to be churned and metabolized into medicine for the community. It was a sacred time, a time out of time, in which the primary work was digesting sorrow. We have felt and seen the swirl of ash in the air. We are all being asked to do the sacred work of transmuting loss into wisdom. So I think that's fundamentally our work here together, and that can look like many, many different types of action. So I'm going to talk about 4 things today. We've had a lot of bad news, so I'm going to begin with a bunch of good news. And we're going to kind of step back and look at big picture good news and then some really good news that's happening here in our state. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the co-benefits of our climate policies, in addition to reducing greenhouse gases, some progress that we are making on resilience, which is really important for us here. And I'm going to share 5 thoughts with you about what I think is important for our particular region here in central Massachusetts. So this is an incredibly challenging time, and it's a time of massive transition. I sometimes think of it as it's almost like a birthing process. You can feel the old thing dying, and you can feel the new thing being born, but none of those processes are quite done yet. And so here we are in the midst of this incredible time. Old frameworks are really being tested, and these new ones are emerging. And we're here kind of midwifing all of that together. So if we zoom out, I know it can be depressing, but if you zoom out, it is really undeniable that the clean energy transition is well underway and we are not going back. So I grew up in Pennsylvania. We have a saying there, the horse is out of the barn. And that is true, right? The clean energy transition is out of the barn. It's not going back. Why is it not going back? Because clean energy is cheaper. That's the fundamental change that we have finally achieved. The price of batteries, the price of solar, the price of wind, all coming down. Battery storage is down almost 90% from 10 years ago. So these are incredible achievements. And last year was the first year on planet Earth that we generated more power globally from renewables than from coal. So that's just going to keep happening. In 2024, solar PV was on average 41% cheaper than fossil fuel plants. Onshore wind was 53% cheaper. And here in the United States, even with all of the headwinds we've been facing, we built the most new power generating capacity in more than 2 decades in 2025. And 54 gigawatts of it were new utility scale generation and storage capacity. Renewables were 61% of that power. Okay, so that's huge, even now, even with how challenging it is. Utility scale energy storage emerged as a central component of new capacity, a record of 15 gigawatts in 2025. That's up 35% in 1 year, up 35% in 1 year. So what does this tell you? It tells you that these projects are profitable. This energy is affordable. It is cheaper than fossil fuels. U.S. investment across the whole energy transition sector, so that's renewables and electrified transport, things like EVs, decarbonization of industrial processes, making our grid stronger. That grew 3.5% year over year, and it was a record $378 billion invested in clean energy just here in the United States just last year. Okay? Corporate power purchase agreement, this is when a company like Google or OpenAI enters into a direct power purchase agreement with a renewables provider. So those power purchase agreements signed for zero carbon electricity, almost 30 gigawatts last year. That's the highest annual total ever. Last year, we saw a growing share of nuclear, hydropower, geothermal contracts from these high-tech companies. EV sales, 1.6 million vehicles in 2025. That was almost 4% higher than the prior year in 2024. So they're selling like hotcakes. Probably some of that was because people were buying before the federal tax credit went away. But if you see now, with the war that's happening, we see again a boost in demand for electric vehicles, both used and new. So I think that trend is going to continue. Here in Massachusetts, last Thursday, how many of you have the ISO New England app on your phones? Okay, get that. Yes, okay, good. One person has it because it makes you happy, right? It makes you super happy because you can look at any given time and see where's our energy coming from here in the New England grid. So maybe you know this, but last Thursday was a pretty amazing day because what happened was 80% of our power in the New England region was coming from clean energy. 80%. Yes. Yes. So that just shows that our policies, the policies that we've been putting in place in Massachusetts and in the other New England states over the past several decades are paying off. And that means less reliance on gas. Gas is very expensive. It is price volatile because it is traded on a global market. So when things happen, like the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, or the events that we're all observing now, gas prices become very high and unpredictable. So for reliability, for stability, for ensuring price control, for affordability in the long term, clean energy is really where we want to be moving. All right. We had 27,000 or so EVs sold here in Massachusetts alone in 2025. We had almost 1,600 new public chargers installed, including 638 fast chargers. That's up 59%. We had 30,567 heat pumps installed in 2025. We saw the start of the New England Clean Energy Connect transmission line that's delivering 1,200 megawatts of hydropower from Quebec. That's 20% of our total electric needs in Massachusetts, and that's a ratepayer savings of around $50 million annually. We saw our new siting and permitting regs for clean energy finalized. Our Massachusetts Community Climate Bank, this is its third year. It's doing great. It is a revolving loan fund. Why does that matter? Because as we see federal dollars going away and we have limited state dollars, we need to be reusing those dollars and stretching them. That's what the Climate Bank does. It gives you a very low interest loan to fully decarbonize your house. You pay it back over 20 years at a super low interest rate. So we are now modeling for that bank, listen to this, 70 to 100% savings in energy use. And that's a human being that comes and works with you, not only to figure out what needs to be done at your house and help you engage the contractors, but also to help you figure out how to finance it. We'll pull together all of the state, federal, local subsidies. There are still some federal subsidies remaining. And then when there's a delta, we will cover it with a loan. So that bank is doing great. We just finished our low embodied carbon protocols for our own purchasing at the state level. So when we build buildings or we're doing roads and bridges, we now have a pathway to be using low embodied carbon. We're very focused on operational carbon. You know, that's what's putting the lights on in here, and we all think about, home heating and things like that. But embodied carbon, which is basically all of the carbon emissions associated with making a thing like this pedestal here, that's a really huge source of emissions. It's about 15% of emissions globally. So things like cement manufacture, very, 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 very polluting when it comes to GHG. Same with some steel manufacturing. Same with window assemblies. So we're going to be starting to collect data on that and shifting over time to low embodied carbon materials to reduce the amount of embodied carbon in our own construction projects. So that report went to the legislature, the Massachusetts legislature, in January 2026. It's available publicly. We've proposed in Mass Ready, probably folks in this room know, what will be one of the nation's first resilience revolving funds. That will be available to municipalities and tribes. Why is that important? Because it's another way for us to stretch our dollars. So we're putting funds into a bank, essentially, that will be available for municipalities. So you need maybe you have an MVP grant, and it tells you there's a couple of culverts you're going to need to replace in order to avoid catastrophic flooding or other inland flooding issues that have been experienced. Think about Deerfield or Leominster, right? So you will then be able to borrow at a low interest rate from this bank to get those projects done. Hugely important for us because there's not enough money out there for resilience. We started a disaster and response fund. We did it in the wake of the 2023 flooding that took place in Western Massachusetts, which was catastrophic for many of our farmers. Now we have a fund. We've got money in it. We'd like to have a little money, more money in it from the legislature. We're going to keep working on that. But that fund is now going to be available to help people after disaster does strike. And when you get money from that fund, you need to agree to build back more resiliently. So we will have resilience standards so that when folks are building back, you will be building back more safely to ensure that the same kind of disaster doesn't strike twice in the same place. For our Green Schools Fund, we give a lot of money away for school decarbonization. This year, we gave you a little sweetener if you came in and told us how you were going to take advantage of the federal tax credits that are still available for ground source heat pumps and for battery storage. Why? Because we want to make sure that we're encouraging communities to go after every dollar themselves too. They can leverage that money and then get a grant from us as well. So that is super important. And we just got a bunch of applications in from that, and we'll be issuing those award notices soon. Our incredible Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, Tom O'Shea, has been developing a blue carbon credit program. The feasibility study is done for that. The idea there is that we'll be able to sell credits associated with the carbon sequestration for our salt marshes. Why is that important? Salt marshes are critically important habitat for our fisheries, for the preservation of species that we just love and are important to us. And also because those are our front line of defense for sea level rise and storm surge. Our salt marshes can absorb a ton of wave energy and protect what's behind them on shore. So that's really important. We're doing the feasibility study on that. We hope to have a credit program up and running over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. Nature-based carbon credits, something very important for our region. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we need to have more revenues coming in that are going to allow us to permanently protect and preserve our critical forests here. Central Massachusetts is home to the most carbon-dense forests in the state. It is vitally important that we protect it. It is not enough solely to focus on the power sector. We need those trees to be protected so that they can continue to deliver carbon sequestration for us. So those are some incredible things that are happening. So I just want to talk briefly about some co-benefits, and I just thought I would give you, rather than give you a bunch of numbers, I thought I would just talk a little bit about two things in particular so you get a sense of it. Some of you might know Phil Landrigan's work. Dr. Landrigan has been around a long time studying health effects of various pollutants. And he's been working with Boston University and just issued a study that came out just a couple of days ago, actually, from Boston College. And they were just looking at the effects of air pollution generally. You know, what's happening in Massachusetts with air pollution? So today, this year, right now, even with all the air pollution controls we have in place on vehicles and stationary sources, we will have 2,800 people die in Massachusetts from air pollution. It's mostly from lung cancer, and sometimes it's from heart problems. We have children across the state who will see cognitive decline, on average 2 IQ points, because of exposure to air pollution. Well, where does the air pollution come from? 95% of it is coming from internal combustion engines that burn fossil fuels. So when you take action like we have to reduce the number of internal combustion engine vehicles on the road, to transition to electric vehicles, to reduce the number of power plants that are burning fossil fuels, you're also reducing this bad pollution. That means particulate matter goes down, and SO2 goes down, and NOx goes down. And that means you get really big health co-benefits. So very important study. It's available online. You can take a peek at it. When we analyzed recently, the Climate Office analyzed the co-benefits of the Commonwealth suite of climate policies, just generally looking at all the stuff we do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What's our sense of what the monetized value of that is? It's $138 billion between now and 2050. That's like free money because people aren't going to get sick because we're reducing other forms of pollution. It's not even the sole purpose of it. It's a co-benefit. So that is really important when we're thinking about policy, to understand that stuff, because it might help us reach different audiences. Folks were talking a little bit about health, introducing us today. It's a very important piece of the puzzle. Another one is cost savings, and I just want to give you one example of that. When you think about things like our building standards, Massachusetts has among the most stringent energy codes in the country. You probably know it has 3 tiers. It has a base code, it has another code, and then it has a specialized code, stretch code and specialized code, and they increase in stringency. So wherever you live, your jurisdiction adopts either the base code, the stretch code, or the specialized code, and then the structures that are built in that jurisdiction need to comply with the applicable code. That's how it works. So what we saw between fall of 2024 and fall of 2025, that 93% of all the multifamily housing that was permitted in Massachusetts met a passive house standard. That's what's required by our most stringent code, the specialized code. So that tells us that the developers have figured out how to do it cost effectively. They're doing it in jurisdictions where it's not even required. Why is that good for people who live in those homes? Because energy bills in a passive house are 75 to 90% cheaper than in a regular house. Can you imagine? Who wouldn't take? I know I would. I live in one of these houses built in 1772 in Barrie. And my energy bills are high, and I've done a lot of work at my house. Who wouldn't love to have a 75 to 90% reduction in their energy bill? So monthly energy costs covering all of the needs, heating, hot water, electricity, can be as low as $35 a month in the winter months. So that just gives you an example of a co-benefit for energy cost savings from a policy that people were kind of angry about when we first did it. You know, like energy costs, that's too strict. Nobody will build anything in Massachusetts anymore. We can't do that. Well, yes, we can. We can. And you know what? It's not that hard. And it's super good for people who live in those homes, in addition to deriving benefits for the grid itself. Because if you're not using all that power, what does it do? It frees up power for everybody else, and that reduces all of our costs as ratepayers because we don't have to build new transformers or new substations. So this is the path to energy affordability. Okay. Wanted to talk a little bit about resilience with you. So this is the thing that really keeps me up at night, which is the fact that we are not exactly where we need to be on resilience. I think that when the governor and I had the opportunity to go and meet Pope Francis in 2024, and on that trip, I got to meet Dr. Ram Ramanathan. Ram's the guy who helped discover the ozone hole and then helped to do the first modeling to try to figure out how much carbon dioxide was being retained in the atmosphere. And if that wasn't good enough, then he went ahead and helped invent some of the machinery that actually went up and took samples and confirmed the correctness of the models. So he's incredible. Ram is in his 80s now. And he has written a number of op-eds, which you may have read in the LA Times and others, warning people, you know, this was before we passed 1.5 for the last, whatever it is, 36 months now, that we would pass it, that we would probably pass 2.0, and that we needed to start to get people ready for that. So in drafting this planetary protocol that was signed by everybody at the Vatican for this summit, he organized it around this concept called MAST, which stands for Mitigation, Adaptation, and Social Transformation. That's the ST, Social Transformation. And it's really, really important, and it's very important for the people in this room in particular, and I want to tie it back in my final closing remarks. But people aren't really ready yet for what's going to happen. We can see some of these impacts starting to happen in the United States. You can see some of the, repeat lost communities that are getting hit over and over again. So that social transformation part is really important. We can't forget about the fact that that is what makes us more resilient. We can talk a lot about built environment resilience, and that is very, very important, and I am going to mention a few things about it. But I wanted to begin today by talking with you about social resilience, social capital, doing what you're doing today, getting to know your neighbors, putting a plan in place for how we're going to work together and know each other, because that is what makes people more likely to survive a disaster. People remember the French heat wave in or around 2005. It was a very, very high mortality rate. Thousands of people died in Paris. Do people remember this? So what did the French government do after that? They went back and they tried to figure out, why did that happen? And it happened because people were very isolated. You might not know your neighbor who lives in the top floor of the building next door and can't get out, and so that person died. So part of what they did was put in place an intentional network where you know you're going to go check on people. There is a way that there is going to be a system in place for communication, and that's really important. We have to start thinking about that stuff too. So let me switch back to you for a few moments on infrastructure. Folks, if you haven't seen it yet, please take a look at, we have a couple of documents you should see. We have our Resilient Mass Plan. That's our state hazard mitigation and adaptation plan that we're required to do for the Federal Stafford Act. We combine ours with our climate adaptation plan. It's an incredible document. It was done by the Baker administration. Please look at it if you haven't already. You've probably seen my climate chief recommendations. If you can't get to sleep one night, I highly recommend it. We have our Resilient Mass Finance Plan, which just came out. That one's really important. So what we're trying to do with that is go through and look at the We called them critical resilience measures, but we looked at the things that we thought were the most high hazard. These are things like high hazard dams, culverts that we know are going to fail, the need to preserve our forests, key transportation infrastructure. And we tried to estimate, and of course we're estimating out 25 years, so this is of its nature somewhat speculative, but that's going to be about $90 to $130 billion to make the investments that we need. So that's one of the reasons why we went ahead and proposed that Resilience Finance Fund, because we're not getting $90 to $130 billion from the federal government, and we're not going to have it at the state level. So we have to start leveraging money from the private sector. That was the genius of the IRA. The IRA was built to leverage money from the private sector, and it was quite successful in doing that, even in its short life. So that's really what we have to be thinking about more in order to do some of these things. So please take a look at that plan. It's very, very important for us. And then we have separately a climate resilience and insurance strategy project that I've been working on with Sam Medlock, and my deputy Aladin Joroff has been doing tremendous work on it. And we've been working with our state insurance commissioner, Mike Caljo, to begin to think about how can we get in place recognition or credit, if you will, from the insurance sector when property owners make investments that are going to make their properties more resilient. So if you think about it, if you're in a high wind area down on the Cape, and we're trying to pilot a fortified roof program. Does everybody know what fortified is? Have you heard of it? Okay, so this is yet another place where we have much to learn from our red state neighbors. Alabama, North Carolina, and soon Dallas are pursuing a program, and Alabama's had it up and running very successfully for a while, called Fortified. Fortified is not rocket science, but in areas where you expect to see hurricane force winds, like we do on the Cape and the islands, you use different construction techniques. And some of it is as simple as, instead of using a straight nail, you use one that looks like a screw, so it won't get pulled out as quickly. So Fortified, you can Google pictures of homes in Alabama that have fortified versus ones that don't. And the ones that have fortified tend to have the roofs on after a high wind event, and the ones that don't have the fortified roofs lose their roofs until they have damage to the contents and the internal structure of the home. So super, super important to begin using this. So Alabama started giving money away to homeowners to do this, started to get some good data. Well, guess who sat up and said, that looks good? The insurance companies. So then the insurance companies want to come along and give a credit for that kind of work. And that makes sense because we are in the same posture, right? You don't want to see a claim, and the insurance companies don't want to see a claim, and we don't want to see you be uninsured and have to come in and back you up on the FAIR plan. So that's really important. And if you kind of step back and think about what does insurance regulation do? Insurance regulation keeps the insurance market solvent. We want a strong, solvent insurance market. We don't want to see people bailing from our insurance market like is happening in California and in Florida, and has happened to some degree out on the Cape. So what can we do to keep people here and to make sure we have affordable insurance is to show that, hey, the state is promoting these investments in resilience so that we're going to have less damage. We see where the risk is and we're addressing that risk. And we want you to keep insuring people here. That's also very good for the credit markets, the bond markets, the raters like Moody's, starting to pay attention to that, starting to see which states are investing in resilience, because that's going to improve our bond rating. So very, very important things that are happening in the resilience space on that side. And just a couple of things in particular I wanted to make sure that you're aware of. Chapter 90. Important. Everybody know what it is? Probably. Chapter 90 bond bill? No? Okay, Chapter 90, you all have to learn about it. It is like the most important vehicle for localities to get money for things like roads and bridges and sidewalks. And this year we put $200 million in it for culverts. And we also changed the culvert permitting process to make it easier for municipalities to put new culverts in place. Culverts are the principal source of inland flooding. First of all, do we know what a culvert is? Yes. Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good. That is very good. Yes, Central Mass. If I ask this question in Boston, I get a lot of puzzled looks. So culverts, very, very important. A big cause of inland flooding because they're too small. They were built for the weather of yesteryear. So the standards for a lot of this stuff, stormwater standards, really go back to 1950, and that planet's gone. So it's really important to update the culverts. I just want you to be aware that there is now this new money, the governor felt very strongly about this, available for culvert replacement. Everybody, I think, knows about MVP. You can get your municipal vulnerability program grant, both for planning, figure out what your highest risks are, and there's now some money for implementation. If it was a culvert project, you could pair it with some of this Chapter 90 money, or if the legislature passes the environmental bond bill, potentially with a loan coming from the resilience finance fund. So you can see how you can start to layer these different sources of capital to get your projects done, and that's really what we're trying to do. Okay, so I think I'm going to switch now to 5 ideas for Central Massachusetts and Western Massachusetts. And then I think we have a little bit of time for questions if I hadn't eaten it all up. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how important forests are for zeroing out emissions. Let's just say forests are important for a whole lot of other reasons too. Talk about co-benefits. You think about the eastern forests, you know, colonial time, this was all completely deforested, denuded. That happened above and through the mid-Atlantic. That forest regrowth is now responsible for about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit of cooling in the summer months. This is a study that just came out last spring. And that's extremely important because if you think about it, forests now are providing air conditioning, they're providing some degree of air pollution removal, they are protecting our aquifers, and they are sequestering carbon. And do they charge us for that? No, it is all free. So it is nuts, absolutely nuts for us to not be protecting our forests as strongly as possible. So we do not get to net zero, by the way. If you have seen our clean energy and climate plan, you know what that graph looks like. If you just look at transportation, building, and energy sectors, it's an asymptotic graph, and we never get to net zero unless we have the drawdown from our wetlands and forests. So it is incredibly important for us to have that negative emissions, and we don't get it without protecting our forests. So super important. I think that is a place where we have huge opportunity here. So we have mapped now where all of our carbon dense forests are. We have done our forests as climate solutions, which is really baking into the Commonwealth's own forestry practices, more climate sensitive strategies. As well, we made changes to our SMART program. That's the program that regulates where solar can go. This is not a good time for us to be cutting down forests to put ground mount solar in. We're moving away from that. The governor passed Executive Order 618, which is our biodiversity order. It's actually the most assertive, ambitious biodiversity targets in the country because it includes marine habitats as well. We are starting, I think, Monday, that's a day from now. We will be announcing the membership of our new pilot commission. Does everyone in the room know what pilot is?
Payment in lieu of tax.
Yes, payment in lieu of taxes. So that happens when, you know, there's state-owned land in a municipality. You're not earning taxes on that because you're not developing it. For, you know, it's conservation land or a forest or something. So maybe you've seen the state auditor's report about that. There's quite a disparity in the price per acre that pilot pays out. Some towns in Western Mass can get as low as $50 an acre, while some towns in the eastern part of the state can get, I think in or around $700 or $800 an acre. So this pilot commission has been directed by the governor to come together and figure out a way to make that more equitable and think about other complementary strategies. So that is super important because read that executive order, please. It directs the commission, among other things, to consider ecosystem services. Okay? Yes, right? This is a gold standard for anybody who's been in this space for a long time. So please keep track of that. There will be opportunities for public input and very important for our area. Resilience investments I spoke about. I just want to make sure I named all of the things. Building standards, and there's one other. Building standards are super important. We have our boards and commissions. We have a body that creates building standards for the state. In the 10th edition of the building code, we just put in a requirement that you have more freeboard if you're in an area that's likely to flood. So when the waters rise, it's not coming in your first floor. But what we realized is we needed more expertise on that board. So we have put in place 2 additional members of that board that have particular experience with resilience. It is kind of a new and emerging field, even in engineering itself, but very important that we start to think about it, and very important that we have local support for that, because sometimes that's hard, right? Like the energy code, local folks didn't always love that. But we need to be backing resilience standards so that when we build something, the people who move into that home are going to be less likely to be harmed by a climate event. Migration. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. We are in an area of the country that is expected to receive a lot of in-migration, so from other parts of the country, like perhaps the Southwest, as it dries, becomes more arid and more hot. We are probably going to receive some migration from southern agriculture, and some of that's starting to happen already, might place some upward pressure on farm prices, so farmland. So I think it's very important, as you guys are thinking about what you want to focus on, and New Hampshire is way ahead of us on this, by the way. Who do we want to be? Who do we want to be when folks come here, either from other parts of the country or from other parts of the world? How are we going to receive that? What's the opportunity that we can think of? So I'll just leave you with that question. Thinking about the social resilience, very important. How are we going to make that happen here? How are we going to build the networks? And there was a little story I wanted to tell you about that, which was very inspiring to me. I think in many ways that COVID was a prequel for climate change. It tested us in some ways that are going to be kind of similar. How many of you guys are familiar with Eastie Farms in East Boston, or have heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't know Kannan Thuruvganen, you should go and meet him. He is phenomenal. Eastie Farms, if you get out of Maverick Station on the Blue Line, you're like in the middle of this intense urban environment. Everything is paved over. There's no trees. And you walk down the street and you turn in a little alley, and suddenly you are in this oasis. And there are trees and birds and bees and a geothermally heated greenhouse and some things that look like boxcars where when you open them up, they've got this UV light and all kinds of vertical growth happening with greens, and they've got mushrooms growing. It's really incredible, and they do a lot of work with kids. So Eastie has a CSA. It's also a real community center, and it's been vital to sort of building the fabric of that community. So when COVID hit, folks might remember Chelsea and East Boston for a time were like 4th in the country for mortality and incidence of COVID. So they got hit really hard because many of those folks had frontline jobs. And the folks at Eastie thought, well, what can we do? What's the most helpful thing to do? Because a lot of people couldn't leave their homes, and you know, it was a time of a lot of fear. And so what they decided to do was they went around to some of the restaurants that had closed and had commercial kitchens. And they said, hey, would you let us use your kitchen? And people said, yeah, we'll let you use the kitchen, Conan. You can come in and do that. And so they started to cook meals. And then they gathered volunteers who delivered those meals to people living in and around East Boston. And that's how that community cared for itself through one of the most difficult times that it has ever faced. And when Conan told me this story, we were sitting in the greenhouse one day, and I could see there was joy when he was telling me the story. And I said, you know, tell me about this, because this must have been terrifying, and it must have been hard, and people are sick, and people are dying. And he's like, yeah, because like everybody came together, and this is a model of what it could be like. And so it really stuck with me. And I want that for our community. That's what I want for our community. Okay, I'm gonna go here. I was writing this last night, and I was like, oh, should I do this or should I not? Because I'm gonna open a hornet's nest.
Do it.
But I love you and I trust you. We need to have a conversation about energy siting in central Massachusetts. I think it might be a difficult dialogue, and I'm here for it. But when I drive through Barry and I see the No Best in Barry signs, I feel really conflicted because I love my home and it's beautiful and I love all the animals that I see there every day and I love how quiet it is and I love how I can see all the stars at night and I don't want that to change. And I also know if we keep saying no to all this stuff, none of us are going to have a home. So I really want to have that conversation. I think it's important for neighbors to talk to each other about it. And I think it's super important for us to have facts about it. So I'll leave that one there. And I will offer that I'm happy to have that conversation whenever anybody wants to have it. Do folks know Reverend Mariama White Hammond? You know, Reverend Mariama said something one time. She was giving a presentation. I try to write down everything she says. I had the terrible experience of being on a panel once with her and Catherine Hayhoe. And I was just sort of shrinking, you know, as they were like so phenomenal through the whole thing. They're both really incredible. And Mariama said this. She said, somebody asked her what her vision was, and she said, my vision is that we get to a place where cities and towns go, I want that here. I want you to build that here. And that really stuck with me too, because I thought it was a brilliant reframe. That's where I want us to be too. That's where I want us to be too. And done the right way. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it with this last thought. And this is just my own desire for our community here and for our neighbors in Western Massachusetts. And that's a call for something that the state really can't do, although we can help support it. We need a vision for a regenerative economic development plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, part of what I've tried to do coming into this office, successfully or not, is to align all of our state spending with our climate goals, whether it's grant making or whether it's our capital investment plan or whatever. And I think we can do that. When I look around and I think about the possibilities here, I was at Wachusett Community College maybe 2 years ago, talking to the guy who runs the greenhouse. And we were talking about, like, what if we grew grain on this whole college? It's like a huge college campus that's mowed all the time. Like, what if we really grew food there? We've got a lot of people in our community that don't have access to healthy food. And we have a lot of people who want to grow it. And we have a lot of youth who want to be doing work in forests and helping to restore those ecosystems. And we have a lot of older people, I'm one of them, who want to work with those youth. I think there's enormous potential for us here. There's all kinds, you know, Mass CEC did a study of the types of manufacturing each of our regions based on our history and our what we bring to it. Look at WPI, look at Clark. Like, we've got that stuff here. There's incredible thinking going on there about clean tech and clean energy. We can be a home for that here. Why isn't that ours too? So that's what I see for our community. And I think we need to start with that vision and really start to action it, because this community has so much of the natural assets and the people that we need to really model what that looks like. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions and answers. I'll say we appreciate statements on our thought spots. How's that sound? But if you have some questions, if you want to stand up, come on up. You can ask a question, or you can stand up and say it loud and proud. Anyone? Yeah, a question right over here.
Something I've been thinking about and wanting to work on are for economic equity, equality issues is like inner cities and poor cities, more pollinator gardens, de-loaning, community gardens and such. And I'm wondering, is there any movement towards that? Like, for example, property tax breaks would be a nice way to help people do that, because there's a lot of things, like I'm trying to unlawn and I do not have the time or money to do it successfully, you know. And I've been working on it off and on for years, so I would love to do more of it. I'd love to do it more thoroughly, de-lawning and putting in pollinators, baby pollinators, and stuff, group gardens and such. And I just don't have that there's just not enough pieces falling into place. And I'm better off than a lot of my neighbors, so I'm sure that it's even harder for them. But I'm thinking, especially people's rental properties, you know, but if there were property tax rates, we need more incentives and more help to bring professionals to help with it, things like that. So I was wondering if there's any, if that's a thought that's been considered.
If you want to go ahead together, and then I'll try to.
So, not specific to pollinators necessarily, but I'm thinking about the examples you gave that were so inspiring. Eastie Farm, the words of Mariana White Hammond. Eastie Farm is a center of mutual aid.
Yes.
Right? So, this is where community does come together. And when we speak of community and we speak of the grassroots, that means different things to different people. And I think people in dense urban environments might look around this room and ask, who from environmental justice communities are here making the decisions, that participating in this discussion? Centers of mutual aid.
Try and hold it closer.
Huh?
Hold the microphone closer.
Centers of mutual aid are
Now you got it.
Eat the mic.
centers of mutual aid are containers, if you will, for the hearing from the welcoming the voices of people who are most impacted, most energy burdened, who live in the houses where the houses themselves are unhealthy. So how do we bring those people in? And we do that, I'm wondering what the state can do, like property tax, relief on property taxes for people who have, like, I sympathize, I've got a yard, I've been doing permaculture there for a while. It is a lot of work, and I have neighbors, I want to bring them in. How does the state allocate money? I mean, this is related to other questions like the climate bank. Who has access to that? You know, what's the gatekeeping around that funding?
I am pretty sure Climate Bank is 135% of AMI, so virtually everybody in the room should probably have access to Climate Bank funds. And if you are looking for a contact at Climate Bank, people can ask my office, or you can go directly to the Climate Bank, which has a website and contact information on it. But we picked mass housing because we wanted to have something specifically that would help people who we want to preserve affordable housing. So that's why it's there. But you guys are asking a question about what the state can do. And I'm not trying to cop out on the question, but right now we're in an environment, and I think, you know, Congressman would agree with this, that there's a lot of sensitivity about what's going to happen in the next fiscal year. The economy is unpredictable right now, and it just got incredibly much more unpredictable over the past 6 weeks. So doing things that are not going to be tax revenue are going to be hard in this environment. That said, I think, you know, the governor has been, you know, very sensitive to ensuring that people have, you know, came in and focused on doing tax cuts. So that has been a focus of the administration. At the same time, you know, trying not to increase fees, costs, taxes on people. So when we think about what money is available, you know, locally, that's one place. When you think about property taxes, that's not something that the state is setting, you know, you can think about what's happening at your local level and advocate for that. But how we are funding things like, a big part of our biodiversity plan is supporting communities and doing more things like pollinator gardens and the like. So I think there is some support through that, but it's not going to be giant. So this is a place where, again, I think we need to figure out, like, don't look to the state. I hate to say that. There is support for some things, but this is really a time when we have to be thinking more about how is, like, we get a little bit from the state, we're not going to get anything from the federal government. what can we do to maybe also tap philanthropy, but what can we do to get the private sector to help support some of these initiatives as well? And some of that is happening. There's a lot of private sector interest, for example, in biodiversity. So I think those are the conversations we have to be having. It's not so much like, you know, I can't do this thing at my house unless I'm going to get a grant from the state. You know, you might be able to get some grant from the state. You might be able to get some MVP money that would help with resilient food system. You might be able to get some money from DAR that would help, you know, with a good resilient food proposal. When we were anticipating that AmeriCorps would stay in place, and the Climate Corps that was started under the Biden administration, we had developed 2 programs, one that would run through DAR and one through Mass CEC, for younger workers to come in and get some training in those spaces, including regenerative agriculture. But we were not able to do that at DAR when the funds got cut for that. So there's probably some small pots of money for grants that can help people get started. And what sounds like might be most important in your situation is not so much like one thing, but more of like a training process, right? Here's how you do it, here's how you bring people together. And that sounds to me like that could be a combination of the organization that's already happening. I bet, let's just do this, just for the hell of it. How many people in this room feel like they have the expertise to, what is your name?
I'm Jessica.
To help Jessica figure out how to do a pollinator garden and how to get some more community gardens happening in her neighborhood. I know I do. Right. So I think this is partly what the exercise is how can we look to the talent and the expertise that's in this room to do it?
And that's in fact a big part of what we're doing. I'm a part of a group along with Anna Wilkins who helped organize this as Stewards for the Future, which is working under the umbrella of New Food Communities. And we are doing that, bringing together grassroots coalition of private, public sector individuals to do these kinds of projects. But like I said, one of the things is like in Fitchburg, where I'm from, you know, it's not a wealthy community, you know, and a lot of the properties are rental properties. So how do we make this sort of thing happen in that situation? So I'm just sort of brainstorming, trying to figure out. I mean, we'd like to see it happen. It's a lot of work, takes a certain amount of money. How does this happen in a place where, in a more working class area where everyone's working like 2 jobs to stay afloat, don't have time for gardening, but would like to, you know, it's a struggle. I'm just wondering what kind of support system you might be.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And it also makes me think of this comment as well, which is asking those folks what would work, you know?
Can we?
We have time for maybe a couple very concise questions. Again, we love statements and more questions on thought spots. So if you have maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So
I have a quick question. Do you know of written material for how to talk to neighbors that you're scared they're going to die when there's an emergency? The people around me that I don't have a contact with, they're too scared to talk to me. They're too isolated. How do I get to them?
That's a great question. And I think we're going to have an announcement on something very soon that I think is going to offer a lot of support in this space, particularly around heat. So I would say if you have that specific question, you know, get in touch with our office. We'll put you in touch with the folks at EEA who have been working on this and get some help for you to think about how to begin those conversations. Neighbor to neighbor, are there people from Neighbor to Neighbor here today?
Yes.
Yes, okay, that makes sense. Neighbor to Neighbor is really good at this too. So that's another resource I would add.
another question over here.
It was great to hear about the stretch codes and how they're being embraced. Very worried, and I hope you can help. So my question to you, can you please talk to the city manager in the city of Worcester, because they're considering placing a moratorium on the specialized stretch code, and that would be such a step backwards. And you just made such great statements about how it's working and it's good for everybody. So I guess this may be an issue facing other municipalities, and I think we need your leadership, like right now.
Yes, let's do it. John O'Donnell, is that the climate chief in Worcester? Odell? John Odell. Yeah. No, he's great. I love him.
I know, but the city manager and the city council aren't listening. That's our problem. So we need a higher level.
Gotcha. I will do. All I'm thinking is I want to do it with him since it's his space. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Chief Hoffer, for your talk today. I appreciate your discussion of. I appreciate your discussion of energy affordability and mutual aid and all the other things you talked about. I'm wondering how public transportation and walkability and in town centers and in our cities. I know electric vehicles are going to be important, especially in rural areas, as the most efficient way for people to get around in the future. But I think, what is the work going on at this level regarding public transportation and climate?
It's a great question. I think the work at the state level right now, for purposes of the RTAs, we have increased funding to the RTAs to be able to and increase the bus service on the regional transportation agencies that provide the transport service in places outside of the greater Boston area. So bus service has increased, I know that, but I am also really aware that it is terrible in this area. So I'm not trying to gloss over that fact, and I know, like, by the time you're switching from bus to bus, I heard a lot of this from some of the students at she's at community college as well. So I think we need to make that better, because obviously it creates a huge barrier for people who might want to go to community college from a job that's in another part of the state and don't have a car, or for seniors. This happened to my own father, living in Pennsylvania as he got older and in an area that wasn't served by any transportation. So it's really important, and I would like to see us look toward more models. Like Colorado has this hop, skip, and jump thing in Boulder, which is basically just like a small, van that is going around with more frequent service for people. You don't have to have, I don't think it's, we have East-West Rail that is on the books and I think coming, but it's that spoke connectivity that we really need that we don't have here. So thinking about how to fund that is really the problem, because as you watched, right now it is the fair share money. That is like half of that. You guys might know it more by the billionaire's tax. Like half of that goes to education, half of that goes to transportation. That is really, really important right now. We would be in a much more difficult spot than we are with transportation funding if we didn't have that money. But we also need more. So thinking about ways to finance expansion. Right now, I think we're in a place where we're trying to maintain our systems and maintain them well, moving towards electrifying the buses around the regions. But we really need to be thinking about expanding like sort of micro transit solutions. I just happened to be up in Burlington, Vermont, for a climate event a couple of weeks ago. And I think that's a model, we could draw on. But trying to find ways to finance microtransit solutions is really important. So this is where your representatives really need to hear from you. The legislature needs to be involved in that discussion. And how are we actually going to solve the problem of rural transportation? Again, something that can really provide a huge amount of savings to families. You can see that pie chart in your mind of a family budget or income, and the slice that is the cost of your home or your place that you're renting, and then the cost of your transportation, especially now with gas prices. So this is another thing that's about affordability.
I think we have time for one last question. Very brief. I did see your hand. Your hand first. 10 words or less, maybe? I bet you can do it. I believe in you.
I am very happy to see that you have forest preservation as your number one concern. That's my number one concern also. Secondary concern is, how do we square that with funds to cut down big swaths of forest for industrial solar? That's the state is telling us that our zoning doesn't matter, that we have to accept industrial development in the middle of residential zoned areas. No, we need other power sources, but maybe these are the wrong places for them.
Well, I just want to say one thing, which is the state is not forcing localities to cut down forests for solar. The courts have held and interpreted the Dover Amendment in a way that says that there can't be unreasonable regulation of solar, and now after Tracer Lane, I think the decision was that that also applies to BESS systems. So I just want to be very clear about that. So here, it's important for localities to understand their own siting preferences. We have in our subsidies for solar now a new scoring system that gives you deductions if you are putting your solar in a place that will result in deforestation. So our ability to influence those kinds of transactions is to put a weight on the scale for things that we want and to take a weight away for things that we don't want. So that's what we did with our smart regulations, is to ensure that if you're going to get some subsidy from the state for solar, we're going to make sure it's for things that are not going to be in forests. So that's how we approach the redo of that. We also did, maybe you're referencing the streamlined permitting that has gone through the legislature, and we just completed our regulations for that. That does expedite by combining the number of legal challenges that folks can bring to siting a energy facility. So it also, though, put in much more public process. So on the one hand, we said, okay, instead of being able to have multiple challenges to an energy facility siting project, we're going to limit that. But we're going to give a lot more process on the front end, so community has opportunity to be in there and really talking about conditions or where it should be and all of that. But these are conversations it's important to have with your local towns and the boards that permit those projects.
Oh, we're having.
Yeah. So this is, I just want to be super clear about that.
Very good.
Thank you.
you so much.
Thank you.
So appreciative, Fire Chief Hoffer, for you to be here. How long are you staying? I know you have a baby mama at home. So. A little bit longer. Okay. So maybe if she's still here at lunch, and those of you that have specific state-oriented questions, you can rush up to Climate Chief Hoffer when we get to the lunch break. But we want to want to sort of get us back talking about our collective work as a Central Mass County, Worcester County group of people. And so we want to tell you a little bit about the journey that, we're going to start with telling you a little bit about the journey that got us to being in the room today. And then we were going to take some steps from there. So Greater Worcester Community Foundation started a process two and a half years ago now, where we started with a sort of a field scan. Who cares about the environment in and around Worcester County? That was where we started. And no, it wasn't a question. I'm done. But thank you for that. I know you all do. That's why you got invited to be here. So when we did that field scan, we kind of, again, going to do some generalizing, but we felt like there were kind of three tiers of interest. I'm going to start with the middle, go up, and then go back down to the bottom. So in the middle were our land trusts. There are 22 land trusts that had footprints in Worcester County, the watersheds, a few other large-scale climate-oriented organizations, food and security, climate education. That we saw as sort of a real good, strong middle tier. They were very good at educating and informing the community. They were very good at engaging volunteers. They seemed like a real sort of stable kind of chunk to build around in terms of countywide regional action. So I'm going to start with that tier. Then we looked at the statewide organizations, of which many of them are resource sources for many of you in the work that you're doing. But it was also very clear that it was an exception for a statewide organization, and by statewide organization, I'm primarily referring to a Boston-based organization, to have a footprint in Worcester County. They were available, they would have resources. If you invited them, they would show up, certainly, but they are not here, with a couple of exceptions. Mass Audubon being a big major exception to that, which is why we at the foundation invited Mass Audubon to partner with us on that work. But that's a real key piece here, and I pledged to myself I would speak ill of Boston at least twice. I think I've done that already. So I'm going to go for 3. We'll see how the day goes. So we got these strong climate environmental anchor institutions, your land trusts, your watersheds, these other groups right here in the middle. We have these state groups that are out there and by the way, I think part of the reason that they haven't been paying much attention to Worcester County is that we've been a little provincial and haven't necessarily been present enough in their lives. But I'm going to mostly consider them to be the bad guys and we're the good guys in this story. Okay, so let's then go to the third group, which is this grassroots tier, which is represented by so many of you in this room. Hyper-local groups, town-based, area-based, around sources of water, around trees, around forests, around particular issues. We're concerned about this development project or that neglected project over there, those sorts of things, very issue-oriented. But all of you really working very local with small groups, trying really hard to find other people to work with. And so we decided from that field scan that we would focus on that tier of people. Let's find the people who are hyper-local, who are in these towns, in these places, and see if we can find a vehicle to bring them together. So we move into the phase one that is referenced on the screens. We hired a consulting firm, Mass Audubon and Greater Worcester together, and they did some research for us. And there were two thesis questions for that research. Question number one was, okay, a lot of people care about these environmental issues, but do they want to work together? Do they have an interest or a taste for, even a hunger for, working collaboratively with other people? That was question number one. And question number two was, if they do, what are the issues that they would be willing to work collaboratively together on, right? So do you want to do it? And what do you want to talk about when you do it? And so we did a process. There was a focus group. Some of you may have taken our survey. We had a couple of convenings. There were some phone interviews made. A lot of information was gathered. And Jen in a moment is going to dive deeper into that information. But here was what we learned generally from that process. Number one, that many of you wanted to work with other people because you were isolated. You felt a little bit hopeless. You felt like you were working alone, or maybe with the people you could pull in, but you were just sort of roaming the prairie trying to make happen what you were trying to make happen, and you wish that you had more people to bolster you and strengthen you and do that together. So that was takeaway number one. That's a reason why we're here today. And takeaway number two was, there are so many issues, and I have my personal issues and my priorities, but we just want to be working with other people who care about environmental issues. And so we're not going to declare up front that this is what we need you to work on. So today we're not talking exclusively about trees or about watersheds or about culverts. What we are going to do is try and collectively share some things and see if we can narrow down to some starting points of that work. And for that, I'm going to pass it on to Jen. Oh, I did it. Oh. I'm here all day.
You deserve it all, Jonathan. All right. So on your tables, under your chairs is a car. No, on your tables, there are some great materials that you can find. So including the results of the data from those surveys and convenings, right? We also have a full copy of that data on the community resource table back then. Again, shameless plug, please go to the community resource table. We will also be sharing that full slide deck in the resource folder, electronic folder, so everyone can take a look at them. But I am not going to read this word for word, but there were some big, commonalities that came out of this work. One of them being that people care, which is great. We know that. I know that so deeply as a Worcester resident and living in Worcester County for the last 20 years. Like, people care. They want to do this work, right? We had a ton of different feedback from land trusts, local organizations, nonprofits, local activists, people who are in this room who gave us feedback, right? And the top picks out of that really were green and blue space conservation, so that's land and water conservation, right? Climate vulnerability and resiliency, and then habitats and biodiversity protection, right? Those were the big three that kind of came out, that rose to the top of that particular survey, right? I don't want to get caught up in this is the only thing. That was just one snapshot in time, right? But it was a really interesting snapshot. And there were a lot of different feedbacks from across the county. A big piece of this is we did not want it to be very Worcester centric. We wanted this to be all across Central Mass. Right? Same thing of the people in the room. And we got a lot of great examples of what some of this work was. I'm not going to read off some of the quotes that we got from amazing partners like the Blackstone Watershed. Steph Covino, you're amazing. Sorry, shout out to Steph. Always good. But for example, that under community engagement and climate education for municipal staff, building that climate capacity in municipal staff, right? Engaging local experts, local groups, and supporting things like, how do I plant a native garden in my backyard, right? How do I get solar, out of the forest and onto the roofs, right? How do we do that, right? So under climate and civic and climate education for community members, some example opportunities out of that survey came out as building community relationships with nature, right? How do you connect people with nature? That's not always an easy thing when transportation doesn't exist to these green and blue spaces, right? When there are economic and social and physical barriers, right? And building capacity for participation in local government as well. How do you not only build up that capacity for local government to work with local people, how do you build up local people to work with local governments? That's really important and different things. And then finally, some other examples that came out of kind of that siloed work and underinvestment was identifying intersectional work. There's a lot of beautiful overlap in this room, and not just because you all live here, right? It's because you care about very similar issues that are intertwined, right? And it's kind of also about ditching these artificial lines that we have created as humans and working with more natural partners, right? A watershed doesn't differentiate between Massachusetts and Rhode Island, but we do in our own little municipal minds, right? We have to get out of that mindset. And how do we, in that same moment, raise our profile here of like what we do here in Central Mass means a lot, not just to Central Mass people, but to the state and to New England and beyond, right? We are great examples. So that's kind of what phase one was. Again, it was not a comprehensive, complete, right? This is one snapshot in time. So phase two brings us here.
Great, thank you. Oh, you got a pause too, Jen. Oh, thank you. Okay, so phase two, which is the rest of our time together, is going to be trying to look, based on what we've learned together, what we know we have in the room, which are people who are interested in working with other people and want to rally around some issues and hopefully find ways to really be impactful. We need to build some muscle memory and get some collaborative experience together. So I'm going to invite Heather back up to the podium. We're going to do something right now where we can get some collaborative experience, and then we will brief you about what's going to happen in the afternoon. So Heather, you are back up.
I want to give thank you. Change the slides. All right. So I want to give you, I'm excited today to really be able to offer you a quick action opportunity that literally could benefit Central Massachusetts. The Protect Water and Nature Ballot Initiative will dedicate funds that it comes from existing sales tax on sporting goods and will protect and conserve water and nature without raising taxes. Critical fact. This law would create a dedicated fund to support the conservation and restoration of water and land in Massachusetts, including Central Massachusetts, and support the creation and improvement of parks, trails, green spaces, and other outdoor recreation spaces. This Nature for All Fund would be funded by the state's existing sales tax on sporting goods, but that's not just basketballs, it's like RVs, camping gear, golf clubs, all right? So collectively together, it equals $100 million a year. And the law would establish a public oversight board that would approve all expenditures from the fund. It would be made up of residents of Massachusetts who would then establish the rules for spending and tracking those funds. And you can see all the different type of organizations that would be eligible to apply for those funds, many of which are represented in organizations in the room here today. All right. So this is indeed funding that would help support these types of projects right here in central Massachusetts. And it is a coalition, a big coalition. Over 100 organizations have joined statewide, some though right here from Central Mass, like Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust and North County Land Trust, who are in the room. So there are many, many organizations, and you can join. We have flyers on the table if you're interested as a representative of an organization in joining the coalition. So what are we actually doing here? Well, the coalition is pursuing two different pathways to success in order to get this fund. We are running a legislative campaign where we're pushing for the state legislature to embrace the bill during the current legislative session. The House bill is currently a study order in the House Committee on Rules, and the Senate version of the bill is in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. In the meantime, we're organizing for a ballot pathway in the event that the legislature doesn't act. And this is to bring the question of creating this fund to a statewide ballot that we all would then get to vote on this November. So this is the process, what it looks like when you do a ballot. For those of you who aren't familiar, we started back in the fall. We already collected 90,000 signatures in the fall, which was the first big hurdle to overcome in order to get on the ballot. Tons of volunteers made this happen. Raise your hand if anyone collected signatures in the room. I'm so dying to know. Yay, some of you. Well, I'm hoping there'll be a lot more hands after the next round, because that's what I'm here to talk about today. It is a quick action opportunity. So this spring, we are working with the legislature, but we are also recruiting volunteers for this spring signature drive. We need to collect 21,000 signatures between May 6th and June 17th, a very short window. And that is our last hurdle then to get on the ballot. And if we get those signatures, we'll actually be in that little red booklet that you guys get every year every time there's an election for ballot issues. And you get to vote on it. So I wanted to say, I know last time we mentioned in phase one, we had done some organizing and convening, and we'd met with some of you. And one of the things that I noticed was there was an immediate appetite to start now. And organizing a big collaborative and coming up with some of the next steps for what we're going to do collectively is going to take a little while. So I wanted to go ahead. I'm a grassroots organizer. I wanted people to have something to do today, right now, because there always is something that we could do. And so we're offering this because it's already a huge campaign that already exists. You could just step right in. The systems are in place. Many of the organizations represented here today could benefit from it. Some are already part of the coalition. So I would just encourage you to consider volunteering. You can volunteer with your organizations. You can recruit others. There are flyers on the table over in the corner for Nature for Mass. They look like this. So grab a flyer. And I just want to take a moment to extra inspire you. Visualize your favorite place in nature, along a meandering trail, beside a rushing river, or picnicking in your neighborhood park. Those are the places that the Nature for Mass ballot initiative would help protect. So you can get involved, grab a flyer, and I am so excited to maybe see you on the streets collecting signatures this spring.